Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I'm doing the Nonfiction Journey Tag. This tag was birthed basically out of the Shakespeare Journey Tag, which then became the Victorian Literature Journey Tag, and now because of Nonfiction November, it has morphed again into the Nonfiction Journey Tag. And I wanted to do this before November is over. The first question is, what was your first experience reading nonfiction? My first experience with nonfiction, not necessarily reading it, but my first experience with nonfiction was the encyclopedia set we had at home. And specifically, it was the very first, the A book, because there was a section on anatomy where they had like transparent paper, like a set of, 3 or 4 different transparent paper, so that you could turn the page and there would be like the nerves, the muscles, the bones. And I remember looking at that constantly. I thought it was so amazing to be able to peel back a layer and see what else was under that. So you took off the skin first, I suppose, and then there must have been muscle and then nerve, and then like there was organs. Anyway, I just found that fascinating. So that was my first experience with nonfiction. But actually reading nonfiction, I remember at the school library, there were the series of books. I think they were from DK. I will find pictures and put them here. But they all had white covers with pictures of a bunch of things from whatever topic it was. They had all sorts of topics. I think they had one on different like animals and different like historical periods. The two that I remember the clearest are the one on gems and the one on ancient Egypt. Those were just great little like factoid books. I loved those. The second question is, has the reading of a work of nonfiction ever brought you to tears? All the time. I have a lot of compassion. I'm also very sensitive. I think especially works of memoir. I think there's just something about hearing a story from the the person's own voice, that really gets to me. Yeah, there's just too many to name. One I will name because of the specific circumstances where I started crying was a memoir called Mama Scotch by Daryl J. McLeod. And I was listening to it on audiobook and I was driving home from work and I had to pull over to have a cry because it was no longer safe for me to drive. Question 3 is, are there any people who have played a significant role in your nonfiction journey? Not really. I was read to as a child, but neither of my parents were huge readers. There were always books. I was always read to at bedtime, that kind of thing. The books in our house were almost exclusively fiction. So I think just being curious and maybe a little bit bored is what spurred me to read more nonfiction. And also growing up, and even now, I really like knowing things. Some may have called me a know-it-all, but I liked knowing things. Question 4 is, do you enjoy documentaries? Do you have a favorite? Is there a subject you'd like to see discussed on film? Do I enjoy documentaries? Yes, I do enjoy them, but I rarely watch documentaries. A lot of them are just really intense. Go back to where I said I was sensitive and cry really easily. I typically, if I'm going to watch like a documentary, I usually watch like a docu-series. I like nature documentaries. My favorite documentary is definitely Tim's Vermeer. I watched this years ago. It had been on Netflix in Canada. I don't know if it's still available there or not. What would I like to see? What subject would I like to see discussed on film? I like kind of things like Tim's Vermeer, things that are a little bit like niche or weird. So Tim's Vermeer is about someone who tries to recreate a Vermeer style painting. And yeah, just kind of weird little oddball things are the types of things that I like. Question 5, have you read a biography about or memoir of a person with whom you identify? Yes, and I have it here. And that's Dancing at the Pity Party, a Dead Mom graphic memoir by Tyler Fetter. So this is her telling her story, the story of when her mother became sick with cancer and her mother's death and the aftermath. I identified with her as someone who's lost a parent. It's like she was just pulling thoughts out of my own head. I've never identified with someone more than that. Question 6 is read aloud a short passage you love from a work of nonfiction. So for this, I chose a section from Between Two Kingdoms, a memoir of a life interrupted by Suleika Jouad. And in this section, so she's gone through cancer treatment and she's kind of ready to, or she's at the point where she's leaving hospital. She's talking about Susan Sontag, who wrote about everyone in the world at some point in their life will belong to the kingdom of the well and the kingdom of the sick. But for me, for all patients, the end goal is eventually to leave the kingdom of the sick. In many cancer wards, there's a bell that patients ring on their last day of treatment, a ceremonial tolling that signals a transition. It's time to say goodbye to the eerie and changeless fluorescence of hospital rooms. It's time to step back into sunlight. It is where I find myself now, on the threshold between an old familiar state and an unknown future. Cancer no longer lives in my blood, but it lives on in other ways, dominating my identity, my relationships, my work, and my thoughts. I'm done with chemo, but I still have my port, which my doctors are waiting to remove until I'm further out of the woods. I'm left with the question of how to repatriate myself to the kingdom of the well, and whether I ever fully can. No treatment protocols or discharge instructions can guide this part of my trajectory. The way forward is going to have to be my own. She talks a lot in this book about never really leaving cancer behind and being stuck between these two kingdoms, hence the name of the book. So that passage really stuck out to me when I read it. Question 7 is, do any works of nonfiction intimidate you? Which ones and why? I am rarely intimidated by works of nonfiction, but if I had to choose one, I would probably choose history, especially those really long history books that are very dense, where there's going to be a lot of names of people and places and dates. And I find all of that kind of information jumbles in my brain and keeps me from seeing maybe the main point. So I do get a little bit worried when I see very long historical books, which is probably why I do not gravitate towards them. Question 8 is, what tips would you give to people hesitant to read nonfiction? I have a couple of tips. I would say to try audio. Some people are able to better, myself included, I think, absorb nonfiction via audio, because it's almost like listening to a podcast, listening to someone explain to you the history of something, or if it's a memoir, listening to the person tell their own story, I think can be really helpful. I'd also recommend starting with something that's light and fun. You don't have to read a really serious historical nonfiction. You don't have to read a biography. Find something maybe a little bit frivolous and fun. Also, my last tip would be to look for, I call them like factoid books. So not books that are like chapters with paragraphs, but books where there's like pictures and a factoid, or even something like a coffee table book can be a good introduction to nonfiction. Question 9 is, what are your favorite works of nonfiction? I've got so many, but I have limited myself to 3. My absolute favorite nonfiction of all time is The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down by Anne Fadiman. Hannah also talked about this when she did this tag. I will link her version below. But it's just an incredible book about a young Hmong girl with severe epilepsy and the conflict between the like Western American medical system and her immigrant parents with different belief systems. And it was just written with so much compassion and balance and real heart. And it was a paradigm shifting book for me. Absolute best nonfiction I've ever read. My other two favorite nonfictions are, actually I'll grab them because I own them. They are Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. This is phenomenal. I'm going to read that again next year. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And the other one is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, Medicine and What Matters in the End. Number 10 is to tag other people to do this. I tag Margaret Pinard and Rosie Cockshut. If you would like to answer these questions, please feel free to talk about your favorite nonfiction in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.